In this lesson, we'll take a look at our site in Google Earth. Okay, so welcome to our course in conceptual site modeling. So this will be another installment in the conceptual phase of design here. And what I have here is a model that we created in a course where we explored conceptual modeling techniques in SKETCHUP. And we're going to basically take this form that we created using some conceptual modeling techniques, and we're going to apply it into our site and see how our concept works. And then we'll begin modeling and sculpting our site, and then we're going to test it out and create views for presentation so we can kind of make sure that our concept works for what our client wants. So in this case, we have our basic concept form here, and what we need to do is we need to access our site really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump to Google Earth, and you actually have your site saved in your project file. So the conceptual mass I was just talking about is your conceptual mass, and it's located in your project file. But your proposed site is also saved as proposed site in your project files. So you can go ahead and download those, and we'll be basically on the same page. So for me to access mine, I'm just going to go to File and Open. I had this saved as another area here. And it's going to take me all the way down to our site. Now let's talk a little bit about our site. So we're going to be here in San Diego. So I like this area because of the buildings, but we have things like water, a lot of trees, and dense population in that area. So there's going to be a lot of things we kind of have to work around when we're doing our site modeling. And it's going to allow us to kind of play around with some of the tools you'll use that's going to help you be able to express your concept professionally and in a really nice looking manner. So where we're at here is our site, San Diego. And we're here in Google Earth, and if you're familiar with Google Earth, there's quite a bit you can actually do with it. Now, the great thing about what we're going to do with our model here is we're going to take a look at how we can use Google Earth to tell the story about the context of our site. But then we're going to take it one step further, and once we're happy with how our design fits into the context of this entire site here, we're then going to use some of the sculpting and sandbox tools to actually create and model out our site here. So we'll have two things. We'll have a more detailed version of exactly what's going on our site, and then we'll also see how our site fits in the context of our entire environment. And that's one of the great things about using Google Earth. Now you can see when I scroll in, I can orbit around, I can fly around, I can go through, I can walk through the streets, all super helpful. Got to take advantage of this technology. So another thing we can do here, you can see we have 3D buildings in place, and even some of these little trees and stuff. These aren't as pretty as I'd like them, but they definitely do the job, especially in the conceptual phase here. 3D buildings definitely help. They let me know if my building's going to fit in to the area and the surrounding architecture as far as building height and form and style and things of that nature. But I also get to see green areas and parking and infrastructure. So very, very, very helpful information here. So the main thing we're going to be using is we're going to use a couple of things. We're going to be using some measuring tools, which we'll find up here. We'll be able to take some crucial measurements, which we'll do momentarily. But we can also turn on and off our 3D buildings here. So if you click on here in your layers and you simply deselect that box, it will turn it into a simple flat image here. And I can click it back on and I have my 3D model. So there's a benefit to both, and we'll see what that is once we get a little further into the course. But for now, we're going to kind of stick with this here. It's going to let us know how our building volume and our massing fits into the context here. So first thing I want to do is I want to export my conceptual mass to this area. But before we do that, I'm going to show you something really quick. You'll notice I went ahead and pinned this particular site. All I did was kind of look around. I knew the region where I wanted to actually place this building, but I couldn't find an actual building site. So all I did was kind of fly around and orbit around until I found an empty place that would be a nice site. I wanted to make sure I had good infrastructure around, tall enough buildings to fit what I'm going to do here. So all I did was place a pin here, going up to the top here on my top left, right here. You can add a place mark, and then once you have it placed, you can just simply click on it and then rename it. And I just call it proposed site. So let's jump back to SKETCHUP real quick. So now what I want to do is I want to prepare this to be visible in SKETCHUP. So if we exported this how it is at the moment, only some of our geometry will be visible, and that'll be all the geometry that you can see that has the white surfaces. Again, SKETCHUP is all about surface modeling. That's what makes it so easy to model things out. We're just creating and modeling and punching holes and extruding surfaces and manipulating surfaces. So with that being said, it's going to be important that our surfaces are facing the right direction so that they are visible if we're going to be using 3D modeling in Google Earth or if we're going to be doing some 3D printing. So in our case, it's going to be for 3D modeling in Google Earth and using Google Earth as a resource. So what we need to do here is actually make sure our faces are all oriented in the right direction, or basically making sure we can see the white side of our faces. So we've really intelligently modeled this thing to individual sections, but we also made copies of things so I can model something and then its reflected or copied element will be updated as well. So it'll minimize the amount of changes I need to make. So let's start from the bottom here. So I'm going to double click on this first one. And I'm just going to highlight everything. So because it's built as its own group, I can highlight everything as long as I'm double clicking this, and it won't select anything I don't want it to select there. So I'll select that, I'll right click, and then we're going to go to reverse faces. And what that did for us here is it turned them white. So now everything is oriented in the right direction. It even took care of our overhangs. So let's do the same thing here. Let's move our way up to the top here. I'm going to go ahead and double click here, highlight everything, right click, reverse faces, and we'll do the same thing for the top. Double click, highlight everything, right click, and reverse faces. Now our faces are all oriented in the right direction and our entire mass will be visible so that we can make better design decisions and we're not frustrated with having to do some extra adjustments as far as getting this placed into Google Earth. So now, only thing we need to do now is export this out and then go ahead and take a couple of crucial measurements that are going to help us start modeling within the SKETCHUP environment. So go to File, Export, 3D Model, and you want to make sure you go to your export type. Make sure you're going with this Collada or this DAE format. And then we're going to go ahead and set this. I'm going to save mine to my desktop really quick. And I'm going to call this Form A. We're going to have two designs that we're going to play with here. So we've got Form A. So I'm going to export that. And now we could jump to Google Earth. And now it's just as easy as going to Add here at the top. And we're going to add a model. So a window will pop up here. And now we just need to browse for it. And we have our latitude and longitude that lets us know exactly where our model needs to be placed. And we can also mess with the altitude. And I'll show you how to work with that and why we may want to work with that a little bit later. But at this phase, we're just trying to get our model dropped in, scale it, and then get some crucial measurements so that we can begin modeling in SKETCHUP. So we're not worried about altitude yet. So I'm going to go Browse. I'm going to my desktop. Move this stuff over so we can see it. And we're looking for Form A. I'm going to say Open. And I'm not going to hit OK or Cancel, but I am going to move this out of the way. And you'll notice here's our model. So because we reversed all our faces and did everything we needed to do, we can see everything that's going on with our model, and we are in good shape so far. So the cool thing about this is I can now move this and position it where it needs to go. So you can see right now this is kind of floating on top of houses, and our proposed site is here. Just kind of scroll in a little bit, and these are actually our grips. So once you see that finger, it'll let you know, hey, you can actually move it now. So I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to move it, and I'm going to drop it to my side. I can actually rotate this building now simply by going to this little circle here. And now, once you see that finger exposed, we can then rotate this and orient this in its right position. So if you grab these corners, this allows us to do some scaling. So now I can then make sure that the volume or my mass fits what's going on with this entire area here. You can definitely see the benefits of this conceptual massing and working with this 3D environment. You want to make sure our building actually fits in with our area. So I'm going to kind of bring this down just a little bit. We don't want to make it too large, but this can be our building here. So once we have what we like, and everything's sized properly, I'm going to now come over here and I'm going to say OK. And what that does is it'll finalize that command and it brings in our model here nicely. So this is the first step. So we're not done yet. This is just basically making sure we can get the right sizing, right volume, and it's going to help us get the placement of our stuff right. So let's get those crucial measurements I talked about. I want to get the size of my site so I can bring that information into into SKETCHUP so that we can start modeling out our site. So grab your tool up here and you'll get a little window up here, and we can either do line, path, or pro. I'm going to go with line. We want to make sure it's set to feet. And now we're just going to start here at this corner, and we're going to try our best to be as accurate as possible and get the actual size of our site. So I'm going to say from this here to this corner, and you can see that measurement there. So I could stretch this out and stretch this out. So you can see there it says map length is 325, and also the ground length is 325. So I'm going to assume that's about 330 because I could see I'm off here just a little bit. And we want to keep our numbers pretty even too. So I'm going to come back out here and I'm going to test this side. So we'll say 330 as well. It's trying to be accurate, but I also want to be realistic so I can model this. We're definitely in the conceptual phase of things here. So 330 by 330, pretty simple measurement. But I also want to get one more measurement here, and that's going to be the measurement from here. So we'll say I know from the building needs, after we scaled it, it needs to sit roughly about 75 feet off of this side. But then also this point or this corner needs to sit, about 75 feet roughly from the edge there. So our magic numbers are going to be 330 by 330, and these are feet. And then that's going to be our site. But then also the 75 by 75. That'll give us a good idea of where we need to place our model. So now that we have this information, we can now jump out of Google Earth, and really don't need this model at this time. So we can close this untitled model if we want to here. And now I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to go back to SKETCHUP. And with that information we have in place, we're now ready to start actually working with terrain and modeling the site for our proposed concept here. So we'll actually tackle that here in the next lesson, where we'll start working with the grounds and getting our concrete and terrain in place. So I'll meet you in the next lesson where we'll start working with sandbox tools and also some rectangles to create our site.